All right, welcome to the April 3rd Aries Working Group call. We've got a number of topics on the agenda. I'm going to jump in with a couple of PRs that I opened. I actually should move that one down. I'll move that one down a bit and won't start with that. Patrick's going to give us an Aries VCX update. Sabasis is did management and agents, and then we'll go through a couple of issues that have come up recently. And as mentioned somewhere in there, I'll do the Aries RFC updates that I proposed. I've got a couple of PRs in that are large changes, but I think relatively, well, maybe a little controversial, but I definitely want people to weigh in on them. We're recording, and I will post the recording after this meeting. Reminder, this is a Linux Foundation, Hyperledger Foundation meeting, so the Linux Foundation antitrust policy is in effect, as is the Hyperledger Code of Conduct. Feel free to edit and add your name to the attendees. Welcome all, and if anyone wants to introduce themselves or say anything about their project or what they're doing, they are welcome to do so now as well. If anyone has any announcements or agenda topics to suggest, grab the microphone now. If you're doing that, I'll make an edit to this and move this down. Nothing. Okay.
Well, hey, Stephen. James Ebert here.
Yeah,
I haven't been around
James.
for a couple of months, but looking
You
to be
haven't?
joining. Yeah, looking to be back for the foreseeable future. So happy to be here.
Awesome. Where are you these days?
I'm over actually just south of you. I'm over presently in Port Townsend, Washington. So just
Ooh.
across the pond there from you.
We can wave to one another.
Exactly.
Wow. I never remember what's the famous town just near there where is it vampires, werewolves? The book.
I do not know.
Oh, come on, it's the famous book. I can't even terrible. I can't remember that. Oh well, we'll keep going. Welcome back, James. Great to have you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, any release status updates? From an ACA-Py perspective, we are still wrapping up the last details of 0.12.0. So still trying to get a couple more PRs done, and then we'll go from there. 0.12.0 RC3 will get released, and then the final. Any other updates to talk about? All right. Patrick, I will turn it over to you to talk about Aries VCX and where you are with it. I will assume you want to share.
Yes, I'll just connect from different computer. So I'll disappear for a second and I should be right back here.
All right. All right, Patrick, there you are. All right, take over.
All right, here I am on the correct machine. Let me just quickly get things ready. Open up the correct windows, and in a moment I'll get started. All right. So sharing screen, or you should see it.
Yeah, we can see it.
All right. So yeah, thank you. I asked last week to do this overview of Aries VCX repository under Hyperledger, which is something what I and the team in APSA mainly has been maintaining over in past until now. Just to paint a complete picture, if anyone missed last week, APSA will be leaving the SSI space itself, so we'll be no longer contributing to Aries VCX under APSA flag, and at the moment it's not clear whether there would be another company or companies interested in taking over the development and taking it where we left it in APSA. But nevertheless, I want to in a best efforts to smoothen out the transition and increase likelihood of other company adopting what we've been building. I want to do this overview of the repo and what you find there, and see hopefully everyone can pick the best parts of it and use it for something or continue working on it. So so just quickly, I'll open my browser actually, and I'll go to the repo just to share the view of what you see when you visit. So there's just few directories, basically mainly these two, there's Aries and there's Ditcore. So there's two parts of the repo. We have Aries stuff, and then we have things which are completely agnostic to Aries, and can be used outside of Aries context. So that's what you generally find in a Ditcore. That's kind of the more foundational component. You can find there crates to work, construct, parse, lookup, dereference, DID document. We have we can open it up, Ditcore. We have a DID parser there, just per the W3 spec, a general parser for any which should parse to make sure that the DIDs are valid. There's specialization. Basically, the parsing works differently for different DID methods, which can specify the rules. So we have support, if I remember right, for the ones, I guess the ones we support in the parser happens to be the same one for which we implemented DID resolver, which those would be the ones which are listed here. maybe some additional, I'm not sure. And yeah, as a third point here, as a resolver and DID methods, I guess that's kind of speaks for itself. These are the ones which you support. So that's Ditcore. This is, as I mentioned, Aries agnostic. Then a level, on the same level, there's Aries. Aries contains, again, a whole bunch of crates. One of happens to be called same as the repo is called. So in this sense, the repository name as it stands today is somewhat confusing because it says Aries VCX. Well, Aries _ VCX is right now just one of the crates contained in the repository, and some of the crates are not even Aries related. So nevertheless, Aries VCX, this crate, historically was the first class citizen. Originally, this crate was the whole repo. But today, today it's still first class citizen in terms of building Aries applications. So it's kind of a main building block, a glue for the Aries stuff. And then even a higher level, there's components in the repo which are not actually, which are actually applications, not libraries, but applications built on top of Aries VCX. So there's agents, and we have number of agents. We have like a mobile demo based on UniFFI. That was that was done by our mentee last year. Likewise, we have implementation of Mediator. Again, props to our mentee, the other mentee who worked on this. And then we have some agents infrastructure which we use for interrupt testing in Aries Agentess harness. Those will be the combination of these two. So that's kind of like 50,000 feet overview of what you find as a DIT core, non-Aries stuff, the Aries components, mainly Aries_VCX and a bunch of other crates which kind of accompanies it and supports it, and Aries agents, actual applications built on top of Aries components. As you can imagine, Aries components are, using this DIT core stuff over here. That's kind of the foundation. Now, if we kind of zoom in a little bit quickly, looking at the DIT core, DIT core stuff. So, kind of repeating myself, I guess, but we have DID doc and DIT implementations. On top of those, we have kind of a general DID resolver interface, and that interface can be, implemented by any DID method. So we have number of resolvers for the ones which you see here: DIT peer, DIT key, DIT solve, DIT web, and yeah. I guess that would be about it here. Don't to dwell, dig in too much on technical details. Rather leave some time for Q&A. So I'll go to the next part. As we are looking at this stack here, so the Aries components. Again, so we have Aries_VCX as the first class citizen for Aries applications. In nutshell, the philosophy and what it does, it's a library. I wouldn't call it framework. It's a more low level than say AFJ. Generally, you have some kind of protocol object which represents the current state of protocol. You get some input message and you combine it with some custom parameters, sometimes optionally, and that will produce you a new response message which you are responsible to send to the counterparty. So basically, Aries_VCX is library which enables you to generate response messages given the current protocol state and input message you received from your counterparty. That is built on top of like three main pillars, building blocks. We have all of these are kind of structured as pluggable interfaces, so we can implement it with different implementations under the hood. We have like pluggable wallet, which has two implementations available: ASCAR and VDR tools. Likewise, for AnonCreds, we currently do not support any other VCs other than AnonCreds, and for AnonCreds, okay, this is out of sync. There's AnonCreds RS and CredX are the implementations which we have currently available. You can choose from. And lastly, likewise, pluggable ledger, which I think is actually really cool because the implementation we have is itself furthermore pluggable, where you can plug in your own underlying client. So you can, for example, you can either choose 0MQ implementation where you directly talk to ledger, or proxy-based implementation where you just make HTTP requests to Indy VDR proxy. Also pluggable cache, so we can choose to cache in memory or in wallet or something else, maybe in a database if you want, in some server environment, and also pluggable transaction signing based on we don't assume what kind of wallet you are using, so you just plug in the logic to sign the transactions. We don't really care how did you sign it, what wallet you used. So it's agnostic to the wallet you are using. And lastly, the last category of agents. Last category of agents here. So we have a mediator implementation. We have UniF5 based mobile demo, which was I'm not sure if it's fully polished for iOS, but I know it works on Android. But UniF5 is generic, so ultimately it should work on both. But I think the demo itself, the application was only done for Android. And then we have the infrastructure to support Aries agent test harness testing. Now, lastly, I want to touch on some strengths and weaknesses. So first, I'll go over weaknesses. So I think the good parts of Aries VCX are the main selling point is the fact that it inherits the good parts of the Rust itself. So type safety, memory safety, all the guarantees and features Rust provides. That can be a big one, given we are building fairly mission critical applications here, and dealing with personal data. So always good to have some safety guarantees, which Rust comes with. Also, the fact that we are able to directly consume other Rust libraries from Aries VCX. I find that awesome because all the other libraries in the ecosystem, like AnonCreds.rs, IndyVDR, were written in Rust, so we can just call them directly and have leverage all the types, in those other crates, and it's easier to understand the code when you go through the layers and dig down. Another good point I find is the modular design that's more relates to the repo itself. I think we strive to make it agnostic of each other and modular. Make sure that the components are loosely coupled. Also, it's I guess selling point for many could be to adopt this could be that it's a library or framework which enables you to build native apps and SDKs, and you only need to test the interoperability once on the Rust layer, and then the SDKs you get out of that are already tested in terms of interop. And lastly, it's not only for mobile use cases, but it's pretty flexible. So you can run this thing on servers for issuer verifiers, mediators. It's not the repository itself is not agent. It's like collection of libraries, tools. So it can be used on different environments, different use cases. Just pick the things you need. Now to cover some weaknesses. There's a missing piece. I believe there's a missing piece in what we have built, and that's kind of a framework-ish layer. So as I mentioned before, for Aries VCX, it's kind of like input message, output message, but it still leaves the consumers of Aries VCX with lots of responsibility to identify. You always have to keep track of the protocol in some kind of storage of your own. Whenever you receive a message, you need to match a thread ID or ID of that message with some kind of state in your storage, and that's your responsibility as a Aries VCX consumer. Also, you have to make sure to decrypt the message when you receive it, make sure that the sender is correct one, is the one you expect. Also, you need to handle the outbounds, the encryption when you are sending message, make sure you're sending it to the right parties, all the stuff like this. And I think this is actually main reason why Aries VCX didn't get more adoption in past, because it's just too much work. And also back in the days there was no UniFFI, perhaps that's the second one. So there's a new component I'm kind of thinking of, proposing something I would call DFRS, DITCOM Framework Rust, which would be more of a batteries included approach on top of Aries VCX, handling all these things you previously had to handle yourself. And perhaps this idea outline here, it shares similarities with AFJ architecture, where it's kind of event driven, and I envision the same here. I think that was the right choice for AFJ to really make it simple for the users, and there's some inspiration to be drawn from that. So this kind of inversion of control, a new layer on top of Aries VCX, which could handle more for the end users being programmers consuming this. I think that could help a lot and make it a lot easier and reduce lots of duplication, which is happening whenever somebody decides to adopt Aries VCX as it stands today. And this green box here, it already exists in some shape or form. We have this kind of general agent library, which we use for the Aries agent test harness testing. And I think through some evolution, we can that could be developed, into something we could actually call event-driven Rust framework. But that's yet some kind of goal or my vision if I would have chance to work on this in the future. That kind of wraps it up. Well, to finish off the list of weaknesses, another weakness is Aries VCX is less feature rich than other implementations. For example, we don't have version 2 issuance and presentations protocols merged yet. Also, we only have implemented did exchange and did peers recently, and we only support AnonCred's verifiable credentials at the moment. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you very much for listening. And if there's a space here and appetite on the audience side, we can do some kind of Q&A. I don't know, Stephen, do we have a time left?
Yeah, are there any questions from anyone? All right. Thanks so
Simple
much.
question.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Stephen. Patrick, one of a very simple question was on the mediator side. Is it set up just as a HTTP like polling strategy, or do you also have WebSockets set up with that mediator implementation? If you know.
Yeah, unfortunately, no WebSockets yet. Only the HTTP endpoint.
Cool.
Okay. Thank you so much, Patrick. What I will do is extract out from the recording just that section. So we'll have both the full recording, but also have an overview of Aries VCX. It can be used for other purposes. So I'll send that link to you and make sure you're aware of it, post it in the page, and that can be used for other purposes. Excellent. Okay, next up on the agenda, Northern Block, Sabasis. Do you want to share screen?
Yeah, Stephen, if that's possible.
Sure, absolutely. There you go.
So let me first share. Can you see my screen?
Yes, looks good.
Looks good. Okay. So this came out, we want to share some observations, some thoughts as we were playing with actually did web with ACA-Py, and we had some observations which we wanted to share with the group here. These thoughts are some initial thoughts, so looking for some feedback and also trying to share what we are thinking currently, or what we see some of the challenges that we are facing as we engage with our internal effort, also as we engage with some of our clients and prospects and partners who are looking for solutions. So this is just sharing the way it works today. So in DITSOLVE, when we are doing agent provisioning, these are the steps. I'm not going to go through the steps. I'm sure you all know this very well. These are the steps we go through. And when we are doing the did web, we found that the steps is slightly different. And what we had to do is, what we actually did was we created a did web outside, because the use case where we were using, we were not initially planning to use the ACA-Py agent, but we were just using the did web for some other use cases. And then as the use case evolved, we needed an agent. So we tried to use, we wanted to use ACA-Py as the agent for that. And we found that it didn't work. And it took us a little bit of time to figure out why it was not working. And the main reason we found that it didn't work is that ACA-Py, you have to actually follow these steps before you create the did web. So we had to actually discard all the did webs we had created, and we had to do everything from scratch. And that is where we started to think about, what needs to be, or what should be the relationship between agents and did webs, agents and did management. So that's where I started to share some thoughts, which reached out to Stephen for some of our thoughts, and it resulted in this presentation. So what we were thinking is that DIDs are not just being used for Aries protocols or diff protocols or similar OIDC or other protocols. DIDs are being used based on our engagement with other prospects and other activities, other work that we are engaged in. We found that DIDs are actually, people were asking DID to be used for other things. And we were struggling to support that with the current process. And the other thing, which I will not get too much into because there's already a lot of public documentation on DIDs which are created, need to have some higher assurance to them. And there's work already happening on that. So today, what we found that the need is that the agent needs to, besides support the ability to create, resolve, update, and deactivate the DIDs, we need a register function, which the ACA-Py has, but the register function is kind of dependent on the create or the initial properties of the DID. And that is where we felt that, is that separation or is that dependency the way to go, or should it get separate? Should it be separated? So that's where this point came, that should we simplify the DID registration and completely look at DID management as a separate component, as a separate function, and treat agents which support protocols as a separate thing. which also leads to, should the keys be managed externally? And I haven't followed everything that Credo is doing, but is the initial thinking, at least without really studying Credo and why they're doing it, the HSM part where the keys are kept externally, is that why Credo is doing it? I don't know the answer to that question, but those type of questions were coming in our minds. The other thing, which is currently just a feature which is missing, I'm sure we'll be working on it, was the need for, we found there are use cases where people are looking for update capabilities along with versioning support for the DIDs. And we also have an opportunity where the prospect is looking for deactivate capabilities. So you create DIDs, you keep it active for a certain time, but there are some business triggers when you need to deactivate. So we felt that's required. So the main question that was coming in our mind is, should we, as I said earlier, should these two be separated or not? The other thing, because it's right now tied very strongly, is that it was impacting interoperability choices also. For example, there are some capabilities in Credo or other agents which, if ACA-Py doesn't have and we need, we could have benefited from it if we are able to support the process of DID registrations. And also, by doing this, we feel it improves our overall story, which is we don't want vendor lock-ins. Similarly, we don't want agent lock-ins as well. So that was kind of the thought process behind it. So this was one thinking, and the other point, while looking at all of this, we were looking at the multi-controller part, where we also started to have some questions, because the multi-controller part of the DID has many use cases, whether it is a parent-child type of relationship between for a DID, or to support a company with multiple directors, or to support really one which we were looking very actively was an employer-employee relationship. This is like, what if you have DIDs like this? And an example of that, the best way I can describe it is when we join a company, like I joined Northern Block, I get an email ID from Northern Block. Now that email ID is in context of Northern Block, and everything that I do using that email ID is trusted by the participants who I send this email to. But it lives beyond my engagement with Northern Block. But that email is in control of Northern Block. They are kind of the owner of that DID or that email that they have given to me. So what we struggled with is that in the multi-controller spec that the DIDs have, is that the control, there's no concept of who's authorized to do what. So anybody can add authentication rules, or assertion rules, or verification rules, and things like that. Now, for sure, we can put that in the business rule, but if we put it in the implementations, the challenge we felt is that it kind of forces what implementations you choose as a consumer of this technology to see what features you get. And if we just look at IAM solutions which have privileged access and different type of access levels, that's quite a recognized and quite an accepted way of looking at identities and what privileges they have. So the thinking again in our mind was that, is it something that we should consider with DID and the multi-controller model? Because the multi-controller model, just to repeat myself, has a lot of very, very good use cases as this technology gets adopted. So yeah, so that is, Stephen, what I had. Hopefully that was helpful. And if there's any question.
Super interesting. This last thing is something we've been thinking about a lot of how to possibly, how little the DID spec includes on, you know, what the key purpose, the purpose of a key. It does have somewhat that, but it's very generalized. Oh, this is for authentication. Well, authentication of what, or where, or this is for authorization, where. None of that is clear. In particular, we're worried about DID controllers, exactly as you've said here, which is who controls a DID and what, and therefore, and what does that mean? Our particular goal is trying to figure out who is allowed to update a DID, who is allowed to change it.
Correct.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just agreeing with you. I'm just totally.
Yeah, okay. So we're trying to figure that out. As well, this starts to get into super interesting things when you get into key management. And if an employee has a DID, by definition, that means they have a key pair that they're controlling and using. And that gets interesting. We had for a long time thought, and I'm not sure it's not right, but that such authorizations would come as a result of possession of verifiable credentials as opposed to DIDs. And so possibility there. I'm not quite sure how best to handle it, but that's where in the past that's where we thought it was originally.
Yeah, I think the cloud wallets, I think the story around individual/citizen wallets is, if I may use the word, simpler than cloud wallets.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say cloud wallets, I mean organizational or wallets which are associated with things, because ultimately somebody acts on behalf of that. So I think the multi-controller thing is a must to support, to drive corporate adoption or adoption within the enterprises.
Mm-hmm.
And key management there becomes very important. Like, it's just a learning from like the IAM solutions where we have the privileged accesses. It's a very similar concept in some ways, but it's missing on DID. So I don't know, and we've debated the same thing, Stephen, is whether we should do things using verifiable credentials or whether we should do things using the DID. For example, we can use the DID to log in onto a website, or we can use a passwordless login credential. But what is the best practice? And the lack of, and I'm using the word lack, maybe it's a little bit too strong, but the lack of these best practices is where we don't know how to use this technology and where it actually impacts adoption. Whereas if we can tell the consumers that you use DIDs for these purposes and you use verifiable credentials for these purposes, I think it probably makes the life of the who are looking to consume this technology easier.
So I would separate out, just to clarify, I think you've got two separate issues in this. Yeah. One is how ACA-Py handles other DIDs and how to register them. and how to use them. And then the second is this idea of DIDs and authorization and control. Is that, would that be accurate? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so there are two things here. One is, should we separate these services? Agents obviously have to always resolve DIDs and we need the ability to register. But
Yes.
should the life cycle of DID be handled independent of the agent? Just so that it's kind of independent of that. And then this whole multi-controller thing, and the only reason I presented both of them here, though they are separate, where they come together is in key management.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that I'm sure there are other things where it'll come together, but that's a very obvious one where they intersect.
Interesting. Okay. Good. Any other questions from anyone? Comments? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for that section. That was very useful and interesting. We need to do some thinking about that. Okay. I'm going to jump quickly into the Aries RFC things that I talked about. And I've put forward. So let me jump to that. So I've got, I demonstrated last week a MakeDocs generated site that I have that I've made available. We actually have published it now, so you can actually see it. Let me remember. Yeah, Aries RFCs. So you can now see this published. It's still rougher than I want, and there's still a bunch of things to change on it. I've actually put an issue in of a checklist of things that I want to get done as part of this, and I'll just be sort of working on over time and welcome help with it. One of the things I noticed very much was, so one of the PRs, first of all, just quickly, is cleanup of things. So when you run the MakeDoc script, you get a pile of errors, many of them to do, over half of them to do with the fact that in the templates, there was no mail to in the link for the name and email address. So everyone just put their name and then a link to their email address as opposed to mail to. So anyway, I've got a pull request that does a pile of cleanups on that, touches 96 files, which is lots of fun, but most of the changes, a lot of them are adding this. So this is a pretty minor thing, doesn't change anything except make it reasonable that we can both use GitHub to navigate through the RFCs, but we can also use this approach of being able to publish and have it work that way. The second one is much more interesting and worth looking at. If you look at the proposed RFCs, there is a very long list of proposed RFCs, of which the vast majority, unfortunately, are not going to make any progress or unlikely to make any progress, and really are just clouding up what Aries RFCs are. There's just a whole pile of them. So where we've got a moderate list of accepted ones, we've got a moderate list of adopted ones, we've got a moderate list of demonstrated ones. The proposed list is incredibly long, and the retired list is pretty small. So what, in chatting with Sam, we came up with this idea that we would have a stalled RF status. So we're adding I'm proposing adding a status called stalled, and that many of the proposed ones move into the stalled status, which is essentially an end state, but we don't want to eliminate ideas that may be good or that people may stumble across and find useful. So we don't want to simply remove them from the repository, but nor do we want to just leave them as proposed. We want all of the active statuses to have a moderate amount, an accurate amount of RFCs in them. So basically, this PR adds the stalled state, updates the code in the index to include the stalled state, and then sets the status based on my opinion, which is definitely needs to be checked over. So please take a look. But goes over a pile of these and just moves them to the either stalled state, the retired state, or for ones that are moving forward, the demonstrated state. There's a set of proposed ones that have recently been put in and implemented. OCA, DIDCOM RPC, the W3C data integrity credential attachment, all of those have now been very much demonstrated and are on their way to acceptance and adoption. So those move forward. Did rotate, in fact, should move to accepted. And then all of these others that you see here go to essentially the stalled state. And if anyone decides they want to look at them and move them forward, they're welcome to. Now, if anyone objects to any of the movements to, say, stalled, I'm totally open to changing that. I just have to tweak the RFC and change the status. So happy to do that, but that's the request from me to you, which is please take a look at these. If you have any objections to the ones that I'm putting to stalled, then let me know and we'll adjust, and then we can talk further about this in the future. And hopefully merge this as part of this goal of getting out a better view of a better way to navigate through these. As well, if anyone knows, I would definitely welcome anyone who wants to improve the style of this. You know, the wrapping here on the long names and so on. If anyone has CSS skills can help out with that, I'd welcome that help as well in moving this forward. Any questions or comments on that idea of moving proposed RFCs to stalled so we have better clarity on what we're actually using?
I think it's a great idea, Stephen. I hadn't seen the RFC website either until this call, and I think it looks great. So
good.
Good work.
Thanks. The other thing I'm planning on doing, Colton, just for your information, is I think I'm going to try to add a DIDCOM V2 category in here and bring in all of the active DIDCOM V2 ones just as a category in here, just as an experiment to see how that goes. So I'll share that with you and we can take a look at that. But that was my idea from way back of how to, sort of publish all DIDCOM ones in one place. The approach to do it, I'm just using writing a script to manipulate where things land, and including DIDCOM V2 is just extending out that script rather easily. So, okay. All right, we're getting towards time. There's a couple of things. Daniel was going to talk about these unqualified DIDs. I think we're very, very close, certainly I think in all three of them. Daniel completed work on testing Credo and ACA-Py together, and that worked rather well. We're very close to having a final one merged in ACA-Py. Daniel's working on that, which will enable how a controller decides whether they want to use DID peer 2 or DID peer 4 and where to use it, and reuse of credentials. I don't know if you guys can hear the barking dog, but I certainly can. DCOM messaging, I'm not prepared to take this one on, so I think we'll wait on this one and take a look at it. But there's issues popping up in all of the repos, Frito, ACA-Py, possibly a spec issue. So trying to get this sorted out. I'm hoping that people like Daniel and Colton and Ariel take a look at this and tell everyone this is the way it should be and let's get it right. But we'll worry about that next week. We've posted an issue in ACA-Py to remove support, remove the Indy SDK. We're not sure, we want to publish this. We deprecated it several versions ago. I think it was 0.90. We deprecated the Indy SDK and announced so that there's text that says this will be removed. The question is it time to remove it? We're definitely looking for feedback on that. And I don't know if anyone has any comments they want to make now, but we're thinking we're going to remove it probably right after 0.12.0. Any comments from anyone on that? Any concerns? All right. And with that, we'll wrap up. I think that is close enough to call time on this. So thanks all for joining. Sam will be back next week and do a much better job at hosting, but in the meantime, I think we got through it. Take care all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.